Cool. There we go. Hey Dean, hey Kim, hey Jeff, how are you? How was your weekend? Oops. That's the stream key, not the link. Go. Daisy, Shelby, how are you? So, how's your weekend treat you? Good, glad to hear that. So, yeah, no, mine was pretty good. It's pretty chill. No football this weekend, so next weekend. Was it this class we were talking about hockey? I was actually watching hockey the other night. So, maybe that's a different class. I can't remember. Might have been a different one. Hang on just a sec. I gotta make sure I'm doing the right thing here. There we go. Apologies about last week on Wednesday. So, let's see, this is week 3. There we go, Monday. I had a little appointment that morning that ran a little long. So, we'll make it up to you today. We will do double Jeopardy trivia. So, we'll get twice as many trivia questions in today. So, you know, you have chances, lots of chances. Looks like we got we got a pretty decent number of people in here, so. That's good. Hey, Matt. Hey, Isaiah. How are you? Ashley, how are you? So, welcome. Hi, Hannah. Cool. Yeah, no, we got quite a few folks here today. That's good stuff. So, let's see. There was something I was going to talk about. What was it? Campus operations update. So I think most of you probably saw this message here, but let me just go over this real quick. So apparently late last week, campus did have their little powwow and trying to figure out exactly what's going on with, returning to class live. My understanding is we are still remote in this class, so we're a lecture-based class, and so priority is being given to lab-based classes. At least that's kind of how I understand it. And we have to ask permission to come back, all right? So because there is a testing constraint, meaning that, under, not just Pueblo County rules, but also like the university itself. They want everybody to come back to school. Anybody who does come back to on-ground classes has to be tested. And so we have a little bit of a testing constraint, meaning we just can't do as many tests, as we like. They understand they're not free and they don't take, they're not instantaneous kind of thing. So you got to kind of pre-plan it a little bit. So the provost is approving only a few classes that need access to facilities on campus. We'll have to wait and see if they resolve the testing constraint until we know whether or not we come back. So bottom line for us is, look, we're just going to keep running with things the way they are. I haven't gotten too many complaints about it. So, if you like the format, speak up. All right. And if it's one of those things that, you really do want to get back onto campus, I need to know that too. All right, because, I need to start advocating for us to be able to come back if that's what we want to do. My understanding is that it's probably unlikely that we would get approved, until they resolve this testing constraint, just because we are a lecture-based class and not a lab class, so we don't need access to any kind of special facilities to do this one. And so, we could request it if you're interested in that. But if you like the things the way they are, that's fine too. And even if we do get a chance to come back, which again, that's not where we're at right now. Regardless of that, you can absolutely complete this class 100% online. So I've got it set up like that. It's fine. All right. If you're nervous about coming back to campus, I know I am a little bit. So just because a few friends that I've had who actually went through this, some of them it was like piece cake, and others not so much. So with my luck, it'd probably be a not so much kind of thing. So, but that's kind of where we stand. All right. So until we get more news, all right, or if they loosen some of those restrictions, or ease up on the testing constraints or something like that, which might happen as more people get the vaccine. I don't know exactly how long it'll take to get to the point in time where we will have access to it, maybe on campus, but I don't know. But we're just gonna keep running with the way things are right now. I give you something kind of firm to plan on and things like that. Because I'm sure maybe some of your other professors don't feel the same way, and they want to get back as soon as possible. So I just want to play it cool. Yeah, no worries. Good to see you, Marcus, David, Ryan. So welcome. We got quite a bit of folks here today, which is good. So, because we're going to do some trivia today, and I'm going to pick the topic, since we're doing double trivia today, we're just going to do general Q&A trivia. And then if you have any good topics for Wednesday, let me know. So, because, general trivia is fun, but it does run a little bit thin. And so if if there's a topic out there that you want to explore in greater detail, we'll absolutely do that here coming up pretty soon. So, but for today, pretty straightforward stuff. I haven't created the announcement yet for what you should be working on, so I'll do that here after we get off the live stream. But Module 1 is done now, so it ended on January 31st, which of course was last night. And so you should have, these three things done here. And then discussion boards, I haven't gone through those yet, but I still have the attendance list from the classes here. Even though the chat isn't posting, if you do post, all right, in the chat, then I can see that and count that as discussions, as opposed towards you actually posting this. Or you can just post up in them too, whatever one works for you. But just make sure that you post a hi, hey, I'm here kind of thing. All right, so when I go back and look at the chat log, then I can give you credit for the discussion. That's absolutely fine. Homework assignments look good from the ones that I graded a bunch of them on, I think it was Saturday, and they look fine. All right, so just make sure that you're doing the citation in the first paragraph. So you have first paragraph that answers the question, any one of the ones that you pick at the end of the chapter. Just make sure that you're actually citing your answer in there. So it's like section 1.1 in parentheses or something like that. The other thing is there is a little bit of confusion on these just regarding the actual assignment sheet. Because I think I have these here where it says single spaced. Yeah, so, all right. Yeah, I thought I made a mistake. No, it's absolutely okay to double space these. In fact, I kind of prefer that. They're a little bit easier to read. All right. I'll have to change this at some point in time, but right now I'll just tell you. All right, this piece here, this is what I want, single spaced, because I don't want that taking up this big old chunk here and actually give enough room to fit everything else on one page. But the rest of it, yeah, definitely double space it. I thought I changed that at one point in time, but maybe I didn't. Yeah, see down here, here's where it says double space. So I'm sorry about the confusion. I definitely want it double spaced. All right, so it's just easier to read on my end, especially when I'm looking at it in Blackboard. All right, so because Blackboard, when I grade it, puts it in a little window like this. Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, no, I knew there was something confusing going on there because I got quite a few people who were like, oh, this is single spaced. And it's like, no, that's a lot of work, man. So that's double the effort. You don't have to do that for those homework assignments. One page is good. One page, double space is absolutely fine. All right. So anyway, next thing that's coming up is Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. And so from this point on in the class, you'll have 2 chapters to do in every single block or module. And so we don't have any additional assignments yet, but those will be coming down the pipe in the next module 3. So we'll talk about case studies when we get there. But yeah, just make sure that you're plowing through this stuff. So Chapter 2, Chapter 3, due in 2 weeks, which will put us at, what, the 14th? Yay! Happy Valentine's Day. Sorry about that. So, oh well. It's not a federal holiday. So anyway, make sure that you get Chapter 2, Chapter 3 homeworks punched in by the 14th there. Knock out those quizzes while you're at it. All right? So with that being said, let's actually talk about chapters. Any questions, comments, concerns on that? Just post them up in there. I'll get to it here today. But Chapter 2 is a really good chapter, and so it's one that I want to spend a little bit more time on. All right, because it's going to be dealing with basically kind of the first leg of the course. So you get past the introduction piece, and then when we dive into the meat of organizational behavior, which is what we're going to start doing today, I want you to think of the class. It's broken into basically 3 segments. All right. And the first segment is by far the longest, all right, meaning that we're going to spend the most time on it. We're spending at least 3 modules on this one, which is the individual, all right, where we talk about, like, when you're managing people, it's important to understand people on kind of a group basis, all right. What are commonalities that you can draw between multiple people within the same group, and how can you manage those commonalities, all right? And so with the first... about the first 3 modules of the class, well, actually the next 3, the first one doesn't really count. The next 3, we're going to be talking about like ways to organize your thinking about dealing with people as individuals, okay? And so we're going to talk about things like personality, mood, emotion, values. We're going to go into motivation theory quite a bit, so because different people, different strokes for different folks, so to speak. But in all of these things, the whole point behind it is to organize your thinking in a way where, all right, so I have to manage 30 people. If I try to manage each individual one as an individual and take all of their own individual nuances and characteristics into consideration, it becomes an immensely difficult management problem, okay? So you can't know that many people that well to be able to actually manage to their own expectations and their own exact desires and things like that. So you have to find ways to organize your thinking around larger groups of people. Okay, and so say like most of the people that I manage want this, all right? But there's a few that want this, all right? And I can do 2 things at once. I can't do 30 things at once, all right? Let alone 300, all right? If you actually, and many of you will get to that point in time earlier in your career than you think, where you're managing so many people that you don't even know who they all are, okay? Maybe you've seen their names on a spreadsheet or something like that, but you don't go talk to them every single day. It's just not possible. I hit a point in time in my career where suddenly I was managing so many people that, I mean, I couldn't recognize them. They'd tap me on the shoulder in Walmart and, hey, Pat, what's going on? I'm like, hey, who are you? But you don't say that because you get it's in the back of your mind that I'm pretty sure this guy works for me, But that's just one of those points in time in your career where suddenly you realize, hey, maybe I've made it a little bit, but it also makes it much more challenging to deal with people as individuals when you're dealing with large groups like that. And so the tools and the things that we're going to talk about in this chapter, the next one, and then we'll wrap it up with, I think motivation is module 4. So yeah, these 3 modules right here, they're all basically designed to help you kind of organize your thinking around people in a way that's a little bit more practical than, learning the individual nuances and the needs, wants, desires, capabilities, and deficiencies, so to speak, of all your employees. All right, and Chapter 2 does a good job of diving into this by talking about personality. All right, and so we're going to get into this a little bit. All right, personality and organization, basic conflict, personality and work behavior. So this chapter has 3 segments here, and personality is probably one of the first ways you want to start thinking about individuals. Okay, well, of course, the first way here, 2.2, is just some basic stuff that I mean, these are important, but maybe a little bit less so in the long run. because some of these things can be changed. And so they talk about like some very fundamental different abilities between people that are very, very noticeable. Hands down, the most noticeable difference between individual employees who are working for you is just their cognitive complexity or their mental ability. All right. Something as simple as like IQ, all right, really does make a big difference. And there's debates over there about how much your IQ actually changes over time. All right. But just to be blunt with you, you're going to be working with certain employees out there who are much sharper knives in the drawer than others. Okay? Now, that's not to say that's a bad thing or a good thing one way or another. It's just an is thing. All right? And so sometimes you're going to have employees who are working for you who are extremely competent in a couple things and absolutely terrible in others. And those are going to be things that you might have to manage around in some respects. You know, maybe you don't put that guy in the CNC machine. Maybe you give him a broom instead, kind of thing. All right? That's absolutely fine. All right? But it is usually one of the things that you notice right off the bat about individuals. You know, you usually in a conversation with someone within about, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes of conversation with someone, you can get a pretty good gauge on their level of intelligence. All right? And especially if it's at one of the extremes. All right? And so there's a lot of different ways to measure this and stuff. All right. One of the things that you will, and I mean, you know, we've all seen stuff like this before. It's basically how they build the SAT test and things like that. Different types of reasoning and aptitudes out there. You know, are you a math person? Or are you more of a language person? You know, some of those things. How quick are you? How sharp are you? You know, in terms of how fast you can actually, you know, think on your feet, stuff like that. Those are all really important things to take into consideration with employees. But also at the same point in time, don't read into that too much, all right? So, because even an employee who's maybe cognitively challenged in one way or another can still be extremely productive, can be an extremely, you know, useful individual as far as the organization is concerned and, you know, contribute, you know, make valid contributions to the team. So don't worry about that in some respects. Just understand that, you know, if you do have things that are cognitively complex, all right, you might be the person, and if you do have employees who maybe aren't necessarily that sharp on these things, regardless of what it is, just understand as a manager, you're going to have a little patience in those cases, okay? You can't expect everybody to get something that's extremely complex right off the bat if you're basically hiring individuals who maybe have a GED or a high school diploma, all right? If you're in an organization where people are college educated, that doesn't really mean anything either because, you know, I probably noticed, I mean, in some cases college is a cakewalk, in other cases it's not. And your experience is different than the person sitting next to you, so to speak. And so it's not really, going through college is not necessarily a really good judge of whether or not you're truly competent either. I would argue that it is a good judge of whether or not you have any kind of like grit and stick-to-itiveness, all right, because college is very easy to quit. So, but still, at the same point in time, I don't know if necessarily denote a certain level of intelligence. So there's certain people out there who don't even ever go to college, and they're freaking brilliant. All right, so and the same thing's true on the flip side. There's people who make it through college, and sometimes you wonder how they managed to tie their shoes that day. You know? And so these are things that you want to think about, just in terms of like maybe in the broad spectrum of things. And when you're working in a new environment, just kind of ask yourself, all right, so like how much complexity is involved in what we do around here? All right, if it's a fairly simple job, it's going to attract people who can actually, you know, survive in that environment and not feel put off by it. If it's a fairly complex environment, it's going to attract a different type of crowd who maybe thrive off that intellectual challenge in one way or another. All right. But if you take away some of that complexity, understand they're going to get bored. All right. And so that's how I want you to think about cognitive ability, mental abilities in particular on the job. Physical abilities is another thing. All right. So, and we could talk about this in some detail. Yes, absolutely. You can work ahead as much as you want. Sorry, I didn't see that one just right away. You can work ahead as far ahead as you want. That's totally fine. If it's in the inbox on Sundays or Mondays, I grade it. So, you know, the only thing that I'd ask you to hold off on is the leader interview. We'll talk about that more down the road. All right, but even if you want to knock that out, go for it. Just touch base with me. All right. So before you get too far into that. But physical abilities are another thing as well. So there are certain jobs out there that do require a certain level of physical, ability, regardless of, like, I don't know, we could talk about ADA laws and things like that. But, when I worked on the railroad, there was actually a physical test that you had to take before you could actually sign up. Now, I guarantee you most of the people who were working there for 10 years couldn't pass that physical again if their lives depended on it, all right? Because working on the railroad is kind of like being a trucker, so it does take its toll over time. All right, but still, at the same point in time, we could use those as actual, cutoff points in terms of selection in the beginning without necessarily getting in trouble with the ADA. There are a lot of jobs that are like this. Things in manufacturing, construction, like pilots. You can't have a colorblind pilot, so there has to be a physical ability to perceive color there. Things like that, or you can't have a deaf pilot. So but this isn't necessarily something that you're all going to see. In fact, a lot of jobs, they don't have any of this at all, especially nowadays. All right. And so when you think about like maybe the things that you can actually test with some kind of accuracy, it would be these things. So you can have someone do a hang test or something like that, or a lift test, whatever. All right. You can have someone sit down and take an IQ test, or actually, perform some kind of cognitive assessment in one way or another, whether it be like, here, solve this math problem in the next 30 seconds, or whether it be like, a more formalized process like GMAT or SAT or something like that. Then you can test this in some ways, all right? But the rest of the stuff that we're going to talk about beyond this is stuff that's really difficult to test. All right, and so you do see some people use this as selection criteria in certain cases, but at the same point in time, just understand that there's differences out there, and that sometimes those differences are things that you're gonna have to work with in one way or another. The next thing out here, and of course these things can all change too. I mean, you can work out and you can actually, beef up your physical abilities. You can do Sudoku and things like that and beef up your mental abilities. So these are a little bit flexible, but we're not necessarily quite sure how much you can actually change these things. To go from like a 0 to a 10 on anyone would actually be a pretty far leap. And so it's pretty normal for you as a manager to, kind of get a good feel for where your folks are and kind of manage to whatever the expectations are in one way or the other. All right? Which is very different than personality, the next thing that we're going to talk about. Okay? So, but trivia time, here we go. So we're going to do 2 questions here, and let me find my... So I had a good site that I was using the other day for this. Let's see if I can find that one again. I think it's this one. Yes. Here we go. What we got in here? Okay. Here's a nerd question for us. So, so for some of you tech, we might have some IT folks in this class too. You should be able to crush this one out really quickly. But this is a good one that you should, I don't know if you really need to know this, but you see it every single day, so I'm kind of curious. What does HTTP stand for? Who can tell me what HTTP stands for? HTTP, Hotel Tango Tango Papa. So what does that actually stand for in your little browser bar before, of course, your web address? So HTTP stands for what? All right, for a free quiz or homework, what do you got? No, not quite. Let's try there, Market. Yes, Dean, you got it. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. I like the fat fingering right there. So, but you got it, Dean. So, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Very, very good. So, oh, that's okay. Yeah, you did forget the P, Marcus. That is part of the HTTP. So yeah, no, it's cool, and it's transfer, not translation. So yeah, but that's okay. Good job, Dean. So Dean, let me know what you want. Quiz or homework. Email me. So you have a delay on your end. Boo. Yeah. Yeah. No, actually, we do have a. Oh yeah, yours might be a little bit off then because. I do have, I've tested it, there's actually a 3-second buffer built in here. It just, the codec that I use is when I'm recording actually has that baked in there. And you know, it preserves the recording qualities for when it uploads later. So, but yeah, sometimes if you're on your phone or something like that, or you know, if your internet's, you know, just a little spotty, things like that, yeah, sometimes it does show up with a little bit of delay. So I have to use the chat log here on my end as our photo camera. And so today, yeah, that means that Dean got this one right. All right, so that's question number 1. Let's do another one here. Let's see. That's enough of those. Let's see. No, I think we already did that one. Or maybe, no, that was a different site. So, let's see. Here we go. What does BMW stand for? All right, what does BMW stand for in English? BMW translates to what? So, in English. Go for it. I actually knew this one. What does BMW stand for? Go for it. Of course, it's a car company. It's a German car company. In English, dude. Oh, man, I'm tempted to give that to you. So, all right, there we go. Hannah, I'll give it to you. Andy, I'll give it to you, too, as well. Even though I said in English, all right? I'm impressed with how fast you're able to bang that out. But, yes, Hannah, you're correct. It is Bavarian engine. Oh, no, actually, you're wrong. All right, so sorry, Hannah, I got to jerk the rug out from underneath you there. So, Jeff, you got it. It's Bavarian Motor Works. So, yeah, so good job, Jeff. Oh, I know, man. Nice job on that one, Andy. I like it. Yeah, no, sorry. It's Bavarian Motor Works. Let's just Google that just to make sure. Yeah, Bavarian Motor Works. Oh, which roughly translates to Bavarian. Okay, all right, Hannah. I'll give it to you too. So you got 3 winners on that one. Man, I'm just being like really generous today. No, Hannah. I'll give it to you. That's fine. All right, so Andy, Dean, and Andy, Jeff, and Hannah, you get points for that one too. And then of course, who got the first one right? That was Dean, right? Yeah. No, I don't want you to double dip. Although, actually, you know what? We'll do another one here in 15 minutes. On the last one, it'll be open, so you can get a chance to get 2 today. That's absolutely fine. But that's on the last one. All right, so since we got quite a few people here, I want to make sure everybody gets a stab at it. So yeah, if you've got one already, you're eliminated until our very last batch of questions right before class ends, and we'll get to that here in about half an hour. Okay? So anyway, good job, guys. That was fun. Yay, 3 winners. I know Pat's being generous today. All right, let's talk about personality. So, yeah. You get a free quiz or homework, so you got to tell me which one you want. So, and then some of you, this has happened a couple times now, and so I don't mean to pick on the one person I've been picking on about this, but if you're in both my classes, you got to tell me which class, and you got to tell me which one you want, okay? Because I don't know exactly, you know, sometimes I can't read your mind. And so, you know, if you get a free quiz, you got to email me so I have a receipt for it. And then when I give you points for it, I'll email you back and say, got it. Okay, and so if you email me, you don't get an email back, and the points don't show up, it's because that email got buried somewhere in there. You know, I get so many emails every day that the list literally just, you know, and so I try to keep on top of it, but if I miss it, it's my bad. But yeah, you got to keep on me about that. It's totally fine. You're not bothering me when you do that. All right, so anyway, let's talk about personality. Personality is a really interesting thing because most of the time that you're going to be dealing with conflict on the job, I would argue that most of the time it actually does stem from what we call personality conflict, meaning 2 people just simply don't get along in one way or another. You can't make people get along, all right, as a manager. All right. And so understanding a little bit of the underpinnings of the ideas behind personality is really, really important, because you can head off a lot of problems if you just find ways to organize your thinking towards individuals in terms of like, all right, so yes, I'm going to kind of categorize people and group them together by personality in one way or another. And there's very simple ways to do that that actually do make sense. Now, the thing that I think makes more sense about personality than, say, like grouping people by ability or skills is you can buff skills and abilities. Personality is something that's really kind of static, all right? It doesn't change too terribly much. There's been a lot of research out there, and the whole idea behind personality, if you've ever taken psychology, like the first 10 minutes in psych class, you you run into Carl Jung and the idea of archetypes. And almost all of personality, all the work that's been done on personality is built upon basically that very basic premise that he came up with back in, oh my gosh, that's the 1920s, 1930s. 1920s, yeah. And so, and the thing that, I want you to take all of this with kind of a grain of salt. There's nothing about personality that's necessarily predictive or necessarily indicative of how someone's going to act in all given situations. But it's a good way to think about people in general, especially when you're dealing with large groups, because you can kind of set things up in a way where, you can make the job or the workplace or the team or whatever it is a little bit more forgiving for people who do kind of fall into a certain type of personality versus another, all right? And so if you can do that, a little bit of design work up front, you can actually stave off almost all of these personality conflicts that are going to be, kind of your constant companion as a manager. And they're not fun to deal with, all right? So, but, personality, let's talk about where it kind of comes from. And so what is personality? It's kind of like the makeup, the psyche of an individual. So how they go about solving problems, how they go about, approaching new situations, where they draw their energy from, things like that. We're going to get into several different theories here on this one. But really, it's kind of like that personal makeup that makes you a little bit unique from everybody else in one way or another, regardless of your skills and things like that, and your abilities, all right? And so it's very, very important on the job for that very simple reason. Is that, it's kind of how people, come to see you after a little while, all right? And so there's a lot of determinants on that. You have physiological determinants, and so, the idea that you have heritable traits from your parents, or, there's family traits and things like that that kind of go down. So any of those heritable things would fall into that. There's cultural determinants as well. So certain personalities are more common in certain cultures as opposed to others. And so there is a component of personality being shaped by the environment in which you grow up, and, that's largely shaped by the society in which you grow up. And so that's very, very important to understand, especially if you're dealing in a multicultural organization. So, sometimes certain personality types, certain ways of going about things, and certain things that are okay versus not okay, those are kind of baked into you when you actually grow up in situations like that. And if you've ever spent some time overseas, you can start to see, oh my God, yeah, there's something that's very, very different out there than what we've got going on here in the United States in some respects. And so sometimes that's important to take into consideration as well. But it does make up part of your personality if that's where you grow up. All right, so family and social group determinants the people that you grew up with, so, and how they treated you as a child. The same thing, how was your school experience when you were growing up? That's going to have an effect on your personality as well. Role determinants, and people, decide various roles very early in life because of factors such as sex, socioeconomic background, and race. We're going to come back to that in chapter 5. Okay, so we got a whole chapter on that. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on that here, but at the same point in time, it's also important to understand that also has some very, very big impacts upon your life as well, and your personality. And so finally, the thing that I want you to think about personality is that there are a lot of really good arguments out there that's basically baked into you by the time you're about 9 or maybe 12 at the latest. Some people say as early as 6. All right. And so, and if you've ever spent some time around little kids, so you ever, I mean, if you have kids yourself, I mean, it's kind of different if you have your own kids because, you're there with them every single day. But if you're in a situation where you have to deal with little kids on a regular basis and maybe they're not yours, so you can take a little bit more of an objective eye on it, you start to see that even like preschoolers and kindergarten kids, they have very unique and distinctive personalities. And then if you're ever in a position where you can follow that kid for a little while, you see that, okay, all changes, after a certain point in time are pretty gradual. There are exceptions to that. There are certain points in time where your personality can flip on a dime. It's not something that is like, there's not much consensus on what actually causes that in some cases. But, there's like certain things that I think even the most skeptical students of this or scholars of this would kind of agree on. And so things like brain trauma is something that can absolutely change your personality. The other thing would be like, there's a few of them that they argue about out there. So like one of them is like deep personal traumatic experiences. So death of a spouse, death of a child is one that's supposed to be one that actually causes that. There's also an argument that deep religious conversion. So if you've ever known someone who had gone from being like, Jehovah's Witness to all of a sudden decide they want to be a Buddhist. Okay, so then maybe that involves some personality change as well. And then the other one, which is probably the most common one that you're going to see on the job, is substance abuse. All right, and so if you find somebody. The first time you come across somebody on the job who's hooked on meth, it's going to blow your mind, okay? I hate to say that, but, depending on the industry you're in, you're going to run into that sooner than you think, okay? And even in other industries, if you're working in any industry that's really high stress, you got to start watching out for some of that stuff. And so you get to know somebody's personality if they're under really high stress over time. And they just seem to be handling it somehow. You should always be a little skeptical of how you're doing that, because sometimes personality changes can be gradual, but when you think about it, if you've worked with somebody for over a year and all of a sudden they get some kind of radical change in their personality, like they get really grouchy now all of a sudden, or, they become really standoffish when they used to be extremely engaged, there's probably something going on there. Okay, so, but yeah, that's the personality. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but one of the best things that you can actually do is just kind of realize that, hey, it's fairly stable, and so if it starts to change radically on you on the job, there's probably something going on with that employee, one way or the other. All right? But with that, understanding like, okay, what elements of personality actually do kind of have an influence on the job, there's quite a bit, all right? Book does a good job of kind of drilling into these, and there's multiple different ways to actually assess personality, but regardless of how you do it, there's like core competencies that most of the different assessments kind of agree on. One of them here is this guy, is self-esteem, all right? Key variable determining work behavior and effectiveness is employee self-esteem. Like how confident are you in self? So your belief about yourself and your own self-worth, all right? So there are a number of studies out there that show that there's a high correlation between people who have high self-esteem and those who are effective on the job, one way or the other, whether or not it's a line position or a management position, something like that. People who feel a little bit more comfortable in their own skin typically do a little bit better in the long run. All right. They don't spend all the time kind of second guessing what they're doing and things like that. They ask for help when they need it, as opposed to people who are like really timid about that, which is fine and it's understandable. But at the same point in time, from a management perspective, if someone's jammed up on something, you want them to say something. Okay. So this thing that I don't want to speak up because I don't, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down kind of thing. If you have that mentality, or maybe you grew up in a culture where that's kind of the way that it is, it's difficult to ask for help, and that's understandable. But at the same point in time, I think if you went out there and asked most managers, they would say, hey, we prefer employees to speak up. And so that comes from people who do have a little bit more self-esteem. Locus control is a tendency among individuals to attribute the events affecting their lives either to their own actions or to external forces. And so, people with what we call a high locus of control are typically a little bit more successful on the job in one way or another. And so there's other ways to measure this out there. All right. In different personality test types. Sometimes this is referred to as something else called consciousness. So conscientiousness. There we go. So well, actually, that's a little bit different, but they're related. But really, when it comes down to it, it's the idea that, hey, if I take responsibility for my own actions, and I realize that, my job performance is related to how well I do, as opposed to how well it make everybody else thinks I'm doing, or, is my own personal financial situation my doing, or my victim of circumstance on this one. Maybe I grew up poor or something like that. People who do have a higher locus of control tend to take better charge of their lives and tend to pursue success. All right. And honestly, as managers, that's something we kind of want. All right. So now I'm not like hiring everybody here with the intention of turning them all into managers someday, or taking my job or something like that. But, I want people to show up. I want people to work hard. I want people to actually be productive and not cause problems. And I get more of that out of people who have a high locus of control versus those who don't. Okay? So if you have a lower, kind of locus of control, well, I mean, it's like external and external kind of thing. But if you think that you're constantly a victim of circumstance, all right, you do have situations in management where people who do that consistently, they just become a pain after a while, And so, if you've ever worked with a person who just constantly complains about things, all right, is just the Eeyore of the office, so to speak, and it's all bad, and it's all, the whole thing is designed to screw me in one way or another. I get jacked on my check. I get screwed on my hours. You didn't check my vacation time well enough. I'm not going to get approved for that. That gets old after a little while. And so if you have those individuals who are constantly feeling that they're victims of their own circumstances in one way or another, as opposed to those people who just kind of take it on the chin, in some respects. I mean, when you make mistakes as a manager, and you will, it'll be a lot easier to apologize to somebody who has a high locus of control versus someone who doesn't, and the person is validated at that point, because maybe you did jack him out of a day off or something like that, or you did mess up their payroll in just a little ways. Then they'll constantly browbeat you with that down the road, because of course it was an instance where they were proved right. Okay, and so that just reinforces that. And so there are difficulties involved with individuals in this case, but it's also an important thing to consider about personality as well. Here's the big one right here. So introversion versus extroversion. This one is common across virtually all the different types of personality assessments that you can do out there. And most people kind of get this one a little bit wrong, because introversion and extroversion, the way that a lot of people really do kind of see it, which is not necessarily accurate. I see a lot of memes on this on LinkedIn and stuff like that, and they're just wrong on a certain level. Is the idea that, well, introverts like to keep to themselves, and extroverts like to get out there in front of the crowd. That's kind of it's kind of true, but that's kind of missing the point too, because the difference between introverts and extroverts is not necessarily where you're comfortable, it's where you draw your energy from. All right. So what are the things that you find that are actually recharging? How do you recharge your batteries? I'm introverted, all right, but I have no problem getting here on YouTube or in a class of 200 people in a lecture hall down at the office. It's fine, okay? I've gotten used to it over time. It doesn't really do anything in terms of drain me or freak me out or anything like that, because I've practiced it 100 times. But really, I don't draw energy from this. I don't get off the live stream here feeling, jacked or amped or anything like that. I feel a little tired, okay? And so what do I do to relax? Well, I'll sit here and watch Netflix, or I'll play Red Dead or something like that, and I'll be by myself. I don't go out and hang out with my friends and things like that in order to recharge my batteries. I do it on my own, okay? And so I find that when I engage with other people, it actually drains my batteries. And when I'm, at home alone, reading a book or watching a movie or something, that's how I recharge my batteries. There are a lot of people who are the exact opposite. All right, so extroverts out there, okay, so I had a big day at work. I want to go out. I want to talk about it. I want to get together with my friends, my buddies, my family, my spouse, whatever. All right, and so that's how they recharge their batteries. And if you ever know someone who, just if they're by themselves, they get kind of miserable after a while. That person's probably extroverted. All right. Likewise, if you don't like talking in front of crowds and things like that, it doesn't necessarily mean you're an introvert. Just ask yourself, how do you recharge your batteries? And you'll have the answer to this question right here. All right. Now, both types are important in the workforce. All right. There is a correlation between management roles and people who are successful in leadership roles and extroversion. So that shows up consistently in the literature and all the studies that are done out there. Now, understand correlation and causation are two different things. All right. But we do find that if we take 100 managers, all right, and say we, find some way to determine whether or not they're successful, most of those managers are going to have a streak of extroversion in them one way or another. So they're people. They like to go out there and shake hands and things like that, and they actually recharge their batteries by interfacing with other people. Nobody really knows why that is, all right? So, it might be a situation where there are just like things that you kind of have to do as a manager, all right? And if we're constantly forcing you to do them because you wouldn't do those things on your own in terms of interfacing with other people, then yeah, in that case, of course, people who would do that naturally are going to be probably more successful in the long run. But at the same point in time, it's not to say that there aren't extremely ineffective introverted leaders. The best example of this is there's actually books out there that go through and they attempt to kind of frame the personalities of very, very famous historical figures. And in American history, hands down, everybody, there's a survey that comes out every single year that's asking who's the greatest president ever, and they go around and they ask, actual historians, not Reddit. So, and consistently for like the last 60, 70 years, it's always been Abraham Lincoln, who was extremely introverted. Okay, he was extremely he would lock himself basically in his office and stuff, but he had this ability to just glad hand with people in a way that was so genuine that he could push past that. But a lot of people just don't understand exactly how much stress he was going through to be able to do that, because he was extremely introverted. And so you're talking about the greatest leader in American history by consensus of experts, all right, is an introvert, okay? And so if you're introverted, like I am in some respects, it doesn't mean you're going to be a bad leader, okay? So there's nothing deterministic about this. Now, this one is important in terms of, like, how do you deal with people on the job, all right? And so out of all the things we're going to talk about in terms of personality, this is the one that I really want you to think about, because it's going to affect how you manage people, all right? And if you can start cutting people with this knife first, meaning like, okay, these are my introverts, these are my extroverts, those are like the first two groups that you're going to learn to manage to, okay? So your introverts, here's your instructions, have at it, I'm going to leave you alone, all right? So if you guys can knock this work out and you don't need any supervision, I'm not going to give it to you, I'm not going to bother you, okay? That's a really effective way to deal with people who are very introverted on your job, if you can pull it off. All right, sometimes you have to treat everybody the same. All right, so other times, project work, things like that, you can give people specific tasks and assignments that are a little bit more baked into their personality. All right, likewise, your extroverts, they're going to want opportunities to shine in front of other people. They're going to want opportunities to interface socially with other people, things like that. If you can give it to them, give it to them. You're going to solve a lot of your management problems right there. If you start mixing these two groups together, that's fine. All right. Just make sure that there's enough capabilities or enough responsibilities in there to justify a team. And also, there's enough variety in work there to keep kind of both ends happy, all right? So group projects are my favorite example. I hate group projects with passion, all right? So there's a reason why I don't assign them in my class, all right? So, but at the same point in time, think about it. If you ever had that group project where it's like, all right, so it's two parts, it's a paper and a presentation, that's your introvert and your extrovert right there, okay? And so if you can take kind of that mentality out in the workforce down the road, you can actually solve a lot of your problems along this. Okay, we are going to come back to this a lot. All right, questions on that, let me know. All right, next thing here is authoritarianism and dogmatism. Right? These things are both very difficult to deal with as managers, and they are absolutely baked into certain personalities out there. All right, so if you think of like authoritarianism, it refers to an individual's orientation towards some kind of authority. All right, so it. All right, so this one's a little bit difficult to explain without going into too much detail on it, but at the same point in time, I mean, like Adorno here actually did some work on this. So high authoritarian people are typically demanding, directive, controlling of their subordinates, submissive and differential towards superiors, intellectually rigid, fearful of social change, highly judgmental and categorical in reactions to others, distrustful and hostile in response to restraint. Okay, if you know people out there who are just ridiculously independent until they actually get to a point in time where they're put in charge of something, and then everything has to be absolutely rigid at that point in time. So you're very kind of by the rules kind of people. That's a function of personality, all right? So, and that personality can come from their parents, the way they were grown, they were raised. It can also come from social situations, their culture in some respects. But in some cases, it's also learned behavior as a form of like a defense mechanism against criticism, okay? And so there's a lot baked into that one. These people, you do have to kind of watch out for this on the job, all right? Because chances are you might work for somebody like this and ask yourself how that goes, all right? But when you become a manager, and that's going to happen sooner in your career than you think, if you have employees who start to exhibit these kind of traits and things like that, you're going to have to start thinking really carefully about what exactly are you going to put them in charge and who are you going to put them in charge of. All right. If you don't do that, are they actually going to find other ways to exert their authority in one way or another? I see this all the time in like healthcare. Okay. I do some work in healthcare. I do some work in with the nursing program here, and there are individuals, who are, maybe they're not qualified to do the next highest job, but they've been the person who's been doing this job for a long enough time. And so, over time, maybe we put them in charge of a training program, or they're in charge of the front desk, or they're in charge of, the medical assistants or something like that. And they just turn into an absolute tyrant, because he gives someone just a little bit of authority, and it gives them a chance to actually like let out that authoritarianism that's been baked into them for a long time. And they go bananas with it. I've seen this happen in class. All right, so down the road we're going to do some power exercises. That'll be interesting to do those online. We'll figure it out. But sometimes even in class, I can take one of your colleagues and just imbue them with a little bit of authority. All right, and this streak just comes out in waves. It just gushes right out. And so you do have to find ways to deal with this as a manager, because if you do have someone who is actually this dogmatic about being in charge and rules and order and stuff like that, sometimes that's a good thing, okay? But that person needs to be put in a position where that's what you want out of it, rather than just like, oh, well, you've been here long enough, so I'm going to have you do this. And then have that come out, and then all of a sudden the employees or the people that this person reports to are, like, what the heck happened, with this individual. So you got to be careful with this. So oftentimes they do perform better under very tight management control. So if you have a supervisor who's in this one, you lay down the law on them, all right? And 9 times out of 10 they'll back off on something. And really, most of us don't fall into this one, and so we don't like to have that manager right over our shoulder all the time. And so don't just jump into this assuming that's what most people need. Make sure that person actually is one of those very rigid type A, by-the-book persons before you try and micromanage. Yeah. Because they might be the opposite. All right. Trait of dogmatism. So it's actually it's baked into here. So Um, this is just a slightly different thing, but dogmatism refers to a particular cognitive style characterized by closed-mindedness and inflexibility. This happens for a lot of reasons, okay? But the one thing that I want you to kind of remember is that almost always it's some kind of defense mechanism, okay? So if you know someone who's extremely dogmatic, and I mean, okay, it's everywhere. We're not going to talk politics. We're not going to talk religion. We're not going to talk about anything like that. I want you to think about sports on this one. All right, we got a Super Bowl coming up next week, and Tom Brady is in it again. I am related to people who hate Tom Brady with a passion, okay? And so there is nothing about like anything that he does that they're willing to extend him any credit for, regardless of these or maybe this, and things like that. And I mean, like personally, I'm not sweet on the guy or anything like that, but at the same point in time, I mean, come on. I mean, obviously it's good. I can see that. And so there's no like closed-mindedness or inflexibility in terms of my approach towards that. All right, but really when it comes down to it, they're jealous of success in that case, all right? Or he trashed one of their teams back in the day, all right? I definitely have some friends who are Steelers fans who just can't get over some of that stuff that happened back in the day, all right? So, or the same thing, they play in the AFC East, and it's just like, oh my God, So they just trash every team out there, all right? But if you find someone who's so dogmatic about that, all right, and it doesn't have to be about sports. I think it's just the most clean and like harmless example out there. All right, because we all fall into that, either for or against a team or something like that. Or even if you're not into sports, there's something else. Brand loyalty is another one. If there's a brand out there that you just have to always buy this brand, I mean that's a form of dogmatism that we use against you to make money off you. Right? So I think so. Yeah. But really, when it comes down to it, this form of dogmatism is something that you're going to have a real difficulty working with at the office, all right? Because really when it comes down to it, if you have someone who adheres to doing things a certain way and has gotten really defensive about that because they view any change in that as some kind of threat, either to their stability, their intellect, their capabilities, their achievements, anything like that, they're going to see that as a threat and they're going to push back. All right. There's no easy way to rip that Band-Aid off in that case. So if you do have someone who's very, very set in the way that they do things and things need to change, your management has told you that things need to change, you need to say, Jerry, this is going to change. Okay. You're going to do it from this way now on. And I understand it's going to make you upset. Let's talk about it. All right. But understand that this is final and this is the way that it's going to be. All right. And if you want to continue working here, you're going to have to get on board with this. And sometimes you're going to lose people over that. All right. So it's just the way it works. And so, you do find dogmatism on the job. You find it amongst people of all ages. It's not, exclusively held by by people who've been on the job for 40 plus years. I've seen very young employees be extremely pig-headed about things. Honestly, it's usually not a fight worth picking. But in certain cases where it's like, no, we're going to do it this way, and if you're not on board with this, you're not coming with us. Sometimes it takes a bona fide legitimate threat like that in order to actually get people to climb off that high horse. I don't know how you do that in sports. So, I mean, I know people are never going to back down from their Brady hate, but still, at the same point in time, you have to ask yourself how much you're willing to engage with that. All right. And as a manager, that's a legit decision to make on your part. All right, so we're getting close up on time here. So I promised you double the trivia. We got to talk about these on Wednesday. Let's talk about this one today. Yeah, we got a few more minutes here. So let's do quick trivia here. 2 questions real fast. All right, and then we'll do 2 more at the end. Let's see, what do we got here? No, I know that. Yep, you know that. No, we're not doing this. All right, comic book fans out there, and everybody who has been watching movies over the last 10 years. All right. So, what was Superman's original birth name? What was Superman's original birth name? Go. So, come on. You shouldn't even have to Google this one. Superman's original birth name. What is it? Free quiz or homework. Superman's original birth name. It's not Clark Kent. Nope. His original birth name. So, wrong. So, oh my gosh, some of you got this one right earlier. There you go, Daisy. Good job. It's Cal L. Excellent. Good job, Daisy. So, free quiz or homework for you. All right. Now, the next question here. Let's see. Ooh, what's the world's longest river? World's longest river. Go for it. World's longest river. Yeah, no, everybody's punching it in there now. Daisy beats y'all to it. She probably knew it. So, world's longest river. What is it? So, Clark Kent is Superman's, like, adopted name. So, yeah. Yes, good job, Brandon. It's the Nile. Oh, Rian, you got it first there before Brandon did. So, sorry about that, buddy. So, that's okay. Next one. No, it's the Nile. It's actually longer than the Amazon, or at least according to my site. Let's just double check. I know that the Amazon is the biggest river by volume. Yep, Nile. So, yep. So, but I know that the Amazon by water flow cubic volume is the largest river. It is not the longest. So, good job. All right, so let's get back to it here. Here, real quick, personality and organization. We're going to go for about 10 more minutes, and then we'll do one more trivia for you here today. But let's talk about, like, conflicts, all right? I'm in denial. Yeah, I love it. So, let's talk about, like, some of the very basic things about personality, conflict on the job, and things like that. So, there is a model of person-organization relationship, and because basic incongruity thesis consists of 3 parts: what individuals want from organizations, what organizations want from individuals, and how these two potentially conflicting sets of desires are harmonized. How do we actually get people to work together? And so, Argus actually talks about something a little bit different here, and it's like, how can you start to actually change, all right, some of those fundamental things that are baked in that we were talking about in the previous section, all right, and really, you know, how can we square some of the circles, all right, when it comes to, you know, differences in terms of personality that become management problems down the road. And so this is how you start working with some of this stuff, all right. And so I suggest that as people grow to maturity, 7 basic changes in needs and interests occur. And so people develop from a state of passivity to a state of increasing activity. And so, you know, eventually you do get to the point in time where you face challenges in your life. All right, and some of those challenges are things that you can solve on your own, and a lot of them aren't. All right, so when you're a kid, you need your parents to do a lot of things for you. But as you get a little bit older, you start to grow in terms of your own capabilities and things like that. And so as you get a little bit older, you take on a lot of those challenges on your own, and you see that you can actually accomplish things on your own. And so when you see all the things out there about, like, changing habits and changing lifestyles and things like that, you know, that sense of agency does come from this idea that eventually you do get to enough activity to the point in time where you realize, oh, actually I'm capable of quite a bit if I put my mind to it. And you develop from a state of dependence, and then you move towards independence over time, all right? Most people get there, all right? So usually sooner than you think, all right? You know, where they feel fairly confident in their own capabilities, and or at least they can survive, all right, on a certain level. And you'll find that there are people who, you know, even though some of them are quite a bit older, they still kind of have, you know, a little bit of a dependency problem on certain things, whether it be individual people or substances or whatever, all right, or modes of thinking and stuff like that. But really, you know, everybody does eventually, by the time you get to the workforce, they've kind of got a little bit of a grip on this, all right? And then, You go from having only a few ways of behaving to having many diverse ways of behaving. And so this is the problem with people who are extremely dogmatic. So when you do have individuals who are very set in their ways, whether or not they be like habits or ways of thinking or bodies of knowledge to which they subscribe, things like that. Eventually, you start to notice that people who are a little bit more capable or people who are a little bit more successful tend to have like multiple modalities and ways of like, okay, like, me, I'm an introvert, but I can speak in front of a crowd of 3,000 people. All right, that's an adaptation, okay, over time. All right, it doesn't mean that I enjoy it. It doesn't mean that I necessarily get amped after I do it, but it means that I can pull it off. I can fake it till I make it, so to speak. And so people do get like really good at developing, skills where, okay, maybe this isn't my natural way of doing things. It's not my go-to method, but I have many tools in my toolbox. All right. And so if I have to use this one in this situation, I will. Okay. As opposed to my preferred method. All right. Yeah. And this one's really interesting. People develop from having shallow, casual, and erratic interests to having fewer but deeper interests. So, and I notice this is especially true after people transition out of high school. All right. And especially when they first engage in the job, maybe even after college in some respects, where you go from having lots of interests and everything's kind of cool and stuff like that to having, and I always thought it was kind of a function of time more so than anything else. So if all of a sudden your life is being eaten up to the tune of 40 to 60 hours a week on a job, all right, and then let alone you have a family afterwards and things like that, which eats up all your time, let alone you're out there, maybe pursuing additional education credentials and stuff like that. All these things manage to kill off your hobbies, all right, and your interests over time. And so you really kind of drill into a few things, all right, that you really do enjoy. And only in the last couple of years of my life have a lot of my hobbies come back to me. They were like birds that I let them go, and they all came back home. But there were many years there where like a lot of my interest started to fade in certain things just because I didn't have time to keep up with it. But I also did notice that when I did have time to spend on something, I spent a lot more time on that one thing. All right, kind of perfecting it in one way or another. All right, and people develop, from having kind of a short-term perspective, what's going to happen tomorrow, where's my next meal going to come from, to having a much more long-term perspective on things. And this is very, very true if you meet people who are well past retirement age. All right, so oftentimes like some of the best things that you can read out there. There's a couple books on this. It's like, words of wisdom from people who are over 90 years old. I mean, there's just absolute gems in there because people take a much more long-term perspective on things than individuals who are maybe, at the beginning of their career, where it's always about that next promotion, it's about that next project, it's about that next job review, things like that. All right. People develop from subordinate to superordinate positions. All right. So you're gonna grow into this very, very quickly in the workforce. All right. Especially since a lot of you are going to get promoted. All right. Probably sooner in your career than you think. All right. And so you're going to feel like a fraud for the first 6 months to a year that you're on that management job. I'm sorry. There's no way around it. The only thing I can do is assure you that you're not. Okay. And just use the opportunity to learn and make mistakes at that point in time, because eventually you do grow into that role where, okay, no, I'm not an employee anymore. I'm a manager. All right, and a lot of people don't like to see that in themselves because they say, well, I'll never be like that. I'll never forget thinking about the little guy, what it's like to be, the person with the broom, all right, and the bad shift and the uniform that doesn't fit kind of thing. All right, but eventually you do move past that and you do get to the point in time where you feel much, much more comfortable actually being in the corner office. All right. Can that lead to hubris? Yeah, all right, sometimes. But really, I think you get more effective at the job once you actually make that transition in some respects. And then the other thing that's really, really important on this one, and it's a good place to kind of leave off here, is you develop from low understanding or awareness of yourself to a much greater understanding and control over yourself as an adult. All right. That comes with experience. It more so comes with miles than necessarily years. All right. And so the more things that you do, the more mistakes that you make, the more activities, the more risks you take and stuff like that, especially early in your career, the sooner that you kind of get a little bit more perspective on, hey, what's actually important for me? what are my capabilities and what are my weaknesses as a manager? Always in the beginning, they'll ask you that question, like in an interview. Oh, tell me about your greatest weaknesses. And you'll come up with something like pithy, It's like, oh, well, I work too hard, and I care too much, and things like that. And, I notice that folks who are a little bit more introspective, they'll actually give you really honest answers to that one because they thought about it. They say, you know what, I just don't like to work on the weekends. I've got this thing where if it's Friday, I'm turning my brain off, and I'm not thinking about work all weekend. If that's a problem around here, I'm not going to be a good fit for the job. Sometimes people get really honest about that, but other times, not so much. And so, but eventually you do get to the point in time where you'll have more control over, your environment, your surrounding, your situation, where you can kind of like recognize your strengths, deal with your faults, and then find a situation where that works, all right, as opposed to trying to make something work because, you don't really know those answers about yourself just quite yet. It does take time. All right. And so you go into this a little bit, work organizations are a little bit backwards on this one. So, what happens is, organizations pursue efficiency and effectiveness, and they do create situations where, the job itself is actually more important than who fills it. All right. In some cases, all right, it's the function of the job. All right. And so the trick is to find the right person for that one in some respects, but also design the job so that it can accept as many people as possible. All right. In order for the greatest chance of success. All right. And so there's some constraints on this. All right. Because organizations often do the following: they create jobs where there's very little control afforded to employees. All right, no employee likes that. All right, unless you're very rigid, dogmatic, authoritarian, and you're absolutely fine, doing the same repetitive task over and over again and doing it to some kind of perfection because you kind of see that as a point of pride. That's fine. People like that are rare. Jobs like that are not. Okay, and that's a problem. All right. Most employees are expected to be passive, dependent, or subordinate, meaning that, shut up, sit down, do what you're told kind of thing. And unfortunately, that's just not a very common way. I mean, if you think about all these things, as people get a little bit more confident and they get a little bit more assertive of themselves, they get a little bit, more independent. This is the exact opposite of what they need, all right, on most jobs. And most of the times, there are only a lot of short-term horizon in their work, meaning like, all right, do we make our numbers at the end of the week? Are we going to make our numbers at the end of the month kind of thing? And as people grow and as they become more capable, they don't think about that, I can remember times in my career where it was like, I'm not going to make my numbers this month. I don't care because I'm going to make them for the year. Company wasn't happy about that. All right, so because it gave them something to pick on me about. All right, fine. Next month I put up great numbers and they backed off. Next month after that, it was just nature of the bill cycle of the cycle where I was working. All right, and I didn't take it too terribly seriously because quite honestly, I knew next month when the numbers went up, they'd put them back on. But this is a mid-level management job, and they're still treating it, like, oh, okay, so we want to make sure that you actually do your work month by month, otherwise you're slacking somehow. It's like, no, man, look at the thing over the course of a year. It's doing great. Never saw it that way. At least my boss did it. So, but that's okay. So, and oftentimes you're placed in repetitive jobs that require only minimal skills and ability. When we get to job design, we're going to talk about like how important it is to actually build a job where people can grow and learn within that job. But most companies, they just don't do that. All right. So the reason why you have a human rather than a machine is because it requires a certain level of intelligence. All right. And, maybe some flexibility, adaptability to be able to do it. Otherwise, we just replace you with an algorithm nowadays. All right. But really, when it comes down to it, people are very good at learning things. All right. And so if you have a job that's just repetitive, rote repetition, and it takes, so maybe it's like a trade job. And so, okay, say it takes really, like 6 months to 9 months to get really good at it. After a year, that employee is going to be bored. All right. And so then the only thing that you can do is either A, pay them more, B, give them better days off, which is essentially the same thing. Or C, maybe give them a trainee so they can pass that knowledge on. But if the fundamental purpose of the job is fulfilled, And it doesn't need to go beyond that. That's going to be a problem for you down the road as a manager. I mean, you're going to have unhappy employees. All right, but that a lot of jobs are like that. They're designed to be replaceable parts. All right, and then people are expected to produce under conditions leading to psychological failure. All right, so all of these things. What do we mean by psychological failure? Psychological failure, basically, we're talking about stress, and we got a whole chapter on that later on down here. But eventually, job stress manifests itself in so many negative ways that I can't even list them off the top of my head, without missing a few of them that are extremely important. Just understand that job stress is it's your number one indicator that something's wrong on the job. It is absolutely your number one indicator. Is a little stress good? Yeah, absolutely. All right. So is chronic, oppressive stress good? No, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for you. It's not good for your employees. It leads to extremely negative outcomes, not just financially for the company, but, physically for you and the employees as well. And so that's the thing that you watch out for. And all these things, a lot of times you design jobs without taking personality into mind, all right, and just assume that people are basically machines in some respects. And it's no wonder they break after a while. Or they fight back, which is even worse. That's definitely what you don't want as a manager, but it does happen. All right, and we'll talk about that when we get to that. But so this last piece here does talk a little bit about how personality changes in some respects. All right. Interesting kind of breakdown on it here, because a lot of people do actually say, nah, it's fairly static and you can design around that. And we'll start talking about that in a little bit greater detail when we start getting into some of the other types of ways in which you can cut personality. All right, so just remember, personality fairly static. Probably the most important thing to take away from it is those three pieces in the previous section: introversion versus extroversion, dogmatism, and authoritarianism. Those are the things that you need to watch out for. And when you actually do start managing, those are the first ways that I would actually cut my employees. Who's my introverts? Who's my extroverts? Extroverts are easy to find. They'll come find you. All right, so introverts not so much. So the people don't come find you. Your authoritarians, you have to watch out for them. All right, especially if they're subordinates. If they are subordinates, put your thumb down on them. All right, so it's actually what they want. If they are your subordinates and you're not aware of it and they have other subordinates underneath them, be prepared for complaints, and lots of them. All right, so if you start finding that you do have that mini office tyrant, whether they're in a position of authority or not, that person needs to be dealt with. All right, immediately. And that, honestly, that's the only way you can do it. All right. And then finally, the dogmatism piece. When you run into employees who are extremely dogmatic, you're going to have to min-max them on this thing. All right. And so if it is actually one of those things where they're dogmatic about something that doesn't matter, like sports, okay, on the job, leave them alone. All right. So don't worry about it. But if they are really dogmatic about something that actually does matter, okay, so like, I don't know, being a stickler for a rule that's obsolete, or, adhering to a policy or a procedure that is way outdated and needs to be replaced, that person needs to be confronted, okay, and said, hey, this is the way it's going to be. If you have a problem with that, duly noted, but we're moving forward with or without you. All right, that's the only way you can kind of break that type of behavior in those cases. Those are the things that you need to watch out for in personality, though, so keep those in mind once you start managing, because they're the first things that you're going to run into. All right, so cool stuff here on personality for the day. We are a little bit over time. I've got us right at what? I think we're at 55 minutes, something like that. I don't know, my timer's gone. So, but we have as I said, one last trivia, open to all. So even if you won a previous one today, I will give you credit for this one. And so, but only one. So if you get the first one right, you can't answer on the second, because I'm going to ask two. Here we go, real fast. What was the name of the fourth book in Harry Potter series? Fourth book in Harry Potter. Which one was it? I just watched this the other night with my daughter. Fourth book in Harry Potter. Which one was it? Which one was it? Oh, man, you guys have to Google this one? You can't just count them off? Come on. Sorcerer's Stone, right? Yes, there you go. Good job, Dean. Oh no, Ashley. Oh no. Oh my gosh, look at all these people who jumped in here. Who got it first? Shelby, you got it first on this one. Shelby, congratulations. Goblet of Fire. That is correct. All right. So, good. Let's see. One more question here. Actually, we'll do two more. Since now we're getting close. We'll do two more. Let's see. Sports. No, I think I already asked that one. What are the surnames of the father-son duos who both served as U.S. presidents? So we've had two presidents who were father-son. What was the last name of both families? So father-son president pairs. Give me the last names. So two of them. Two of them. Who were they? I know you all know the second one. You should know the second one. So, okay, what's the other one? Two of them. There are two. So Bush is one. Yes, I want them both. Who can give them both to me? Nope, not Roosevelt. They were cousins. They were second cousins. So good try. So it's Bush and somebody else. Who is it? Bush and Adams. Good job, Dean. You got it. You got it. You got them both in there. Bush and Adams. So John Adams and his son John Quincy Adams were the second and sixth president or fifth president. Yeah, let's see. It's Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Adams. Yeah, so it's fifth president. So second and fifth, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. All right. And then, oh, Rianne said it first? Did she? You just said Adams. You didn't say, oh, okay, so you got Bush and then Adams later on? I don't know. Dean's got Bush and Adams. That's what I was asking. All right, I'll give it to you too. So, but I'm not going to take it away from Dean either because he actually took the time to punch that all in. So, good job, man. All right, one more. And then we'll call it good. What name is used to refer to a group of frogs? A group of frogs is called what? A group of frogs. So like a flock of frogs. It's not called a flock. What is it called? A group of frogs. What is it? For the win today. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. A group of frogs is called what? Ashley, good job. Yes, it is an army. So, yes, you got it in there first, Ashley. Excellent job. So, well, actually, I gave you Bush and Adams, didn't I? No, that was Dean. All right, so, Ashley, you're good. I got you on this one. All right. So, we're going to call it quits here for the day. It is an army of frogs. What is it? It's an army of frogs. It's a murder of crows. I think a group of owls is called a congress, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it's a college. I can't remember. So yeah, I'm sure it's on the site there. But we're going to go ahead and pull the pin here on this one today. I'll stick around for a couple minutes just in case you have any other questions. But just keep this stuff in mind with personality in particular. It's about organizing how you think about employees. So introverts, extroverts, think about those first. Think about your authoritarians and think about the people in your organization who are a little dogmatic about those things. Those are going to be your management challenges right there. If you can design around those principles, you're going to be in good shape. You're going to avoid a lot of personality conflict. All right? So, but we'll continue on Wednesday with values and ethics, which is where things get a little bit more flexible than they are with personality. All right? Values, ethics, and then next week we'll get to mood and emotion where things are very, very different. All right? Even on a daily basis, let alone over the course of, say, your entire career. So we'll leave it with you at that. Have a wonderful couple days. I hear the weather's supposed to be nice, so get out there and enjoy it before it turns crappy again, because, of course, it's February in Colorado, and that's what we do. All right, so we'll catch you all on Wednesday, and like I said, I'll stick around here for a minute or two just in case you have any questions. But if not, we'll see you on Wednesday. Take care. Have fun. Enjoy the weather, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye, Daisy. See ya. Again, email me if you got something today. I gave out a lot today, so email me. Tell me what you want. Be specific, all right? So tell me I want quiz 14, or I want, homework 6, Email me. All right. Not seeing any more questions in there, so we'll catch y'all next time. Take care now. Bye. You too, Rian.